The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order! The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Big Ben Haslar is presiding. We all rise for the Honorable Judge Haslar. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Before we begin, I'd like to extend our appreciation to special guest juror of the week, Bouncin Bobby LePire. Welcome, sir.
Hi, how is everyone?
Oh, we're about to dive into it, son. Today we are hearing the case of the people versus Zack Snyder's Justice League, the 2021 director's cut of the 2017 Justice League film. This film tells the story of a team of mighty DC superheroes who must band together to turn back a world-ending threat. An original comic book movie plot, if ever there was one. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Mr. Slow-Mo Snyder Bro, Ryan Luis Rodriguez, you are appearing on behalf of the prosecution. You may begin your opening statement.
You fuckers and your nicknames. I swear to God.
I wish I would have read that one first.
I am no Snyder, bro. We live in a society where a visual stylist specializing in colorless sludge masquerading as a storyteller spawns a rabid, toxic fan base. A society where that fan base can harass and intimidate a telecommunications giant into spending more than $100 million with marketing on producing and streaming a 4-hour glorified DVD extra version of a theatrically released Franken-movie. A society where these fans unironically claim that characters like Batman should be as gritty and grimdark as possible, despite the fact that he's a man in a rubber bat suit. A society where these fans insist that Superman, the big blue Boy Scout, gets more interesting when he mopes. Through 5 succinct arguments, I shall prove that living in a society where Zack Snyder's Justice League exists sends a clear signal. We must burn society to the ground and pee on the ashes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slow-Mo. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Mr. Dylan J. Schlender. You may begin your opening statement, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want everyone to listen. Do you hear that? Could it be...
It's the barbarians, isn't it?
Of course it's the barbarians. It's always the barbarians. But rising over the din, a plea, a cry, a call for help, a call for action. This is Zack Snyder's Justice League. Raise the portcullis and let it through. Today we take a stand against the hordes and embrace true art, true cinema. We let a film transcend being a mere movie and let it speak for the heart and soul of its director. Snyder has been unfairly maligned, the barbarians tearing away at his art piece by piece. But here in this court, we will have a healing. We will have a hearing. This court will set the record. We will embrace this film. And as the good people look towards the cultural scoreboard in the sky, with this film firmly in the good column, we will with one voice say, count it. Thank you.
As self-indulgent as Mr. Snyder himself. Thank you, Mr. Schlender.
Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez, you may present your first exhibit.
Let's talk characters.
Objection.
Fuck you,
overruled,
Dylan.
sir.
God damn it. There is no one right way to do comic book characters. Interpretations are just that, interpretations. But when you present those interpretations as the mainline continuity, as the ultimate portrayals of these characters, this is unacceptable. Some questions. Why does Batman have vehicles with turret guns full of fetishistically depicted bullets? Has he learned nothing from the death of his parents? Why does he allow Martha Kent's house to be repossessed and only help her after resurrecting her dead son? Why does Superman have to die to become the inspiring Superman he should have been since the beginning? Also, why did they need a mother box to resurrect him when the dirt rose from his grave in the last movie? Why is a significant chunk of this movie about grave robbing the Man of Steel? Additional points subtracted for having Lois Lane fail the Bechdel test. Why does the Flash have such a hideous costume? Granted, his costumes are all over the place in the comics, but the DC Comics logo at the start of the movie is a better design, and that logo has no faces. Also, if his running creates lightning scars on the walls around him and causes the pavement to crack beneath his feet, wouldn't every environment he ever steps in be a trail of breadcrumbs that leads to his secret identity? I also had a why question for Cyborg at some point, but I forgot it because I don't care.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, if I may respond, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
First of all, Mr. Rodriguez is right. This is an interpretation. Debatable whether or not this is supposed to be the be-all and end-all. As we know, DC has a quite expansive Elseworld universe, which Snyder borrows from quite liberally, be it Frank Miller's interpretations of Batman and Superman, seeing them go against each other, and features like The Dark Knight Returns, or something like Wade and Ross's Kingdom Come, which does feature a more jaded, or to use the derogatory term of Mr. Rodriguez, mopey Superman, but he still inspires and comes back and leads the old guard against the hordes of 90s herodom, and we're better for it. So where the Flash comes in, as far as his powers being all over the place, this isn't lightning. This is energy from the Speed Force. We do see him tear the pavement up when he goes to a halt in it to save Iris West, which is a very interesting thread to develop.
Now, I said lightning scars on the walls. I did not say that lightning comes out of his powers.
All right, but that's still the Speed Force, and so maybe they could find him, and frankly, they did find him on security footage. That's how Batman found him, so the fact that he's not particularly sneaky isn't really a demerit. I mean, he's a young guy. He doesn't quite understand his powers. I mean, one of the first things he does, he immediately joins the Justice League. He's very excited to be in and be friends, and attempts to understand and better legitimize his powers.
Yes, but any of his enemies could find him and kill him.
Well, who are his enemies?
Well, he appears at the beginning of Suicide Squad and turns in Captain Boomerang, so clearly he's already had interactions with some of these villains. That's what I mean.
So he takes on Captain Boomerang, who's already in prison, and Captain Boomerang's not going to try to hunt him down, search him down? Maybe he will. Maybe the Flash needs to be more careful because he's an impetuous youth in this. So
maybe he already
you're
hasn't
saying,
been... No.
Well, I'm just saying everything you're saying fits well with his character.
What about his boss that he's who's going to hire him? And he's playing with the puppy dogs.
Well, that's just a funny little bit. You know what I mean? He's the funny guy.
And now her puppy mill is destroyed, sir.
The puppy mill is not destroyed, though that window will be expensive to replace. But can you really put the cost on a glass door when you're saving a young woman's life?
I hope she takes it out of his fucking paycheck.
Well, he needs to get hired first. And let's face it, Bruce Wayne will bail him out. As he said, his superpower is money.
It's good to
That's
be
true.
rich.
It is
As
good
long
to be
as
rich.
you're white.
Yeah, no, having dismantled his character points, Your Honor, I think Brian should move on to his next point.
Objection bullshit.
Overruled.
Hey, who's the judge?
Yeah, I'm going to overrule that.
I have a theory that Zack Snyder is secretly 3 puppies stacked on each other's shoulders in a person's suit. Because
That goes to my third point. God damn it.
Because he seemingly can't see in color. If you're gonna go black and white with your cinematography, commit. Go all the way. Nut up or shut up. Why is Jack Kirby's Fourth World all about design and color and staging look primarily black and orange? Why is his supposed vision so muddy and drab? Why is his design sense so ugly? Ooh, Steppenwolf has spikes now. What a paradigm shift. I was listening to an audio commentary with James Cameron the other day, and he talked about how he didn't like using slow motion in action scenes. He only used them for emphasis. Zack Snyder uses it because he can't foster an emotional connection to something, so he has to over-attack it aesthetically in a desperate bid to scream, "This is important!" To that point, why is there what feels like 2 entire football games with Victor Stone pre-Cyborg in slow motion? We have no idea what the stakes of the game are, if there are any, and it seems to all lead to emphasizing that Victor was an athlete and that his dad didn't show up to a game. Great. I'm glad we watched 17 minutes of him slowly running across a field.
I mean, that was cool. Cyborg was an athlete. He did have some father issues. He had trouble accepting his gifts, whether or not that was him being an athlete or becoming the cyborg. It was.
And so what does the slow motion have to do with that exactly?
So the slow motion is Snyder's aesthetic. I mean, that is something we're going to have to leave to the jury. Either you like it or you don't. I mean, if you liked it, we wouldn't have much of a case here. I mean, it's cool. It's neat seeing the action stretched out. I mean, he does this in all of his movies. He does it in 300. He did it in BVS. And if he'll make another movie, he's going to do it again.
I hate them.
and that's fine that you hate it, but it is his aesthetic and it is his vision. And there is something to be said about a director following through on their vision. And that's what he was able to do with this feature.
And what is the point of rendering Apocalypse if it's going to look orange and brown?
Apocalypse even looks orange and brown in the, what you will admit, much loved Superman cartoon that you and me both love, and Justice League Unlimited and Justice League.
And what color is Darkseid in that?
He is gray and blue with his orange.
Oh, blue! You say blue. Now, what color is Mr. Miracle?
Mr. Miracle does not even appear.
What color is Granny Goodness?
Granny Goodness is green.
What color is Big Barda?
Big Barda. Oh, well, what is she dressed as? Is she as one of... Well, we're getting off on a tangent because...
Objection, Your Honor, nerds!
It will be interesting when they release the black and white version of this film, just to see what the differences are. I will side with Mr. Rodriguez
none.
on that one.
Absolutely none. I could watch
like
this with the color turned off on my TV, and it wouldn't make a goddamn difference.
Mr. Rodriguez, your next point, please.
Much like I tire of how Snyder's films look, I really tire of how they feel. He strikes me as a dude bro who confuses gritty and dark for adult. Here's a quote. "This movie's insane. It's like so epic and like probably rated R. There's like this one scene where like Batman drops an F-bomb and like Steppenwolf is like pretty much just hacking people to death. Seller, bro." So a movie with Superman in it, the light at the center of the DC universe, is in this kind of movie. His movies are both somehow childish and pretentious. There's a scene where the Flash saves an unnamed Iris West from a car crash into another car in a hot dog cart, and there are buns and wieners everywhere, but the soundtrack is twee piano and soulful singing. What is the tone? What is the bass line? Is it goofy or is it somber? Why does he traffic in such clumsy heavy-handedness? Is it to throw the audience off the scent of how basic everything is? To patronize the audience? When Barry and Bruce are driving off after their first meeting, they pass by a billboard that screams, "You are not alone!" Get it? He has friends now. It's not as egregious as the news broadcasts in Batman v Superman of talking heads describing the subtext, but it's still showing and telling.
And that is a very comic book-esque thing, though. When you look at the talking heads, that is a staple of Frank Miller comics. We even see that in such venerated comics like The Watchmen. You know, that is a common trope, is to show things and not just say them, that you get from comics.
Thank you for citing Frank Miller, one of the worst writers and one of the best drawers.
I would go the opposite. I prefer his writing over his drawings, but
Watchmen, the comic book, is not on trial here, sir.
No. Frank Miller didn't do Watchmen. That was
Alan Moore.
Alan Moore, yes. No, I kept wanting to say Alex Ross because I was talking about Kingdom Come earlier, but that's not right, obviously.
Much better looking comic than this movie.
Question from the jury. Have you read Holy Terror? Because that's pure Frank Miller and is absolute trash.
Yep.
Okay, hey, jury, save it, okay? What is this?
Mr. Schlender, are you finished with your rebuttal?
I'm never finished, Your Honor. But in the interest of time, I will allow.
You're close enough.
Yes.
Very well, Mr. Rodriguez.
Much has been made of the 4-hour runtime with good reason. I am personally of the mind that movies should be as long as they need to be. If I'm enjoying a movie, I do not give a shit how long it is. What else am I going to do? Pretend that I have business to attend to? I don't. Might as well watch a long movie. But 4 hours for a movie about 6 characters and a lightly sketched villain and endless ancillary characters is the definition of excessive. The pace is languid, the scenes overextended. All movies start off long as assembly cuts, where all the footage is shot and put together in sequential order and then pruned. But I don't think anything was pruned here. This is the full repetitive assembly. In a very early scene, Bruce Wayne slowly crosses a tundra and there are sweeping flyover shots ad nauseum. 1 flyover, 2 flyover, 3 flyover. I get it. Snow. It's cold. Move on.
We have to understand that we live in 2021 despite Mr. Rodriguez's antediluvian sensibilities.
Oh, go to hell.
We live in an age where everyone has streaming services at their fingertips. Now, I will be the first to admit this is not a theatrical movie. This would be not what would be. He would not release this in theaters. They wouldn't do it. It would be like Heaven's Gate all over again. But it came to HBO Max by design. People could watch this in the comfort of their own home. He had chapter breaks so you could watch it at your leisure. This is 21st century movie making. This is the future. We give directors the chance to explore their vision, and this was Snyder's last chance to get everything he had in his heart and soul about Justice League out there. He might not get the opportunity to make another movie, so he was able to lay it all bare out there for us in a moment of incredible strength and vulnerability. And he is getting skewered by the barbarians like Mr. Rodriguez for showing this vulnerability. Well, I, for one, applaud it.
Okay, first of all, 3 points. 1, he has a movie coming out this year. 2, if that's the future, I don't want to live in it. 3, it's called the Zack Snyder Cut, right? And the theatrical version is called the theatrical cut, meaning there should be cuts in there, meaning this is what he thought the movie should look like the entire time. That's what the Zack Snyder cut.
Well, of course, it's what he thought it should look like. That wouldn't mean it would be palatable for theaters, but it is palatable for HBO Max.
Okay, if it's not palatable for theaters, then I will have my final argument, which pertains to my last. Was this ever releasable in any fashion? No. Would people sit through a 4-hour version of this in a theater? No. Would Warner Brothers release their Avengers-like crossover with an R rating? No. Also, it doesn't correspond to the movies released after. In Aquaman, what happened to Jason Momoa's milky eyes? What happened to Amber Heard's abysmal British accent? When did Atlantis revert from this dead, decayed former civilization? Why do Atlanteans need to create air pockets to speak underwater? Also, why are there Batman Christmas ornaments in Shazam? Are kids big fans of supposed urban legends who brand criminals so they get murdered in prison? Is there merchandising potential there?
Again,
Mr. Schlender?
What we have to realize with this movie is that it is an interesting, unique specimen. It's not going to fit in perfectly with those other movies because this was Snyder's vision and he lost control of the entirety of this Justice League universe, of being involved in these other movies in a meaningful way because of the unfortunate personal events in his life. So this is a restoration of that vision, and I believe that if something were to have happened where he could have seen through some version of the Snyder version in 2017, I grant you it probably wouldn't have been 4 hours. You would see some of those issues addressed in the later movies.
I agree with the prosecution that this movie is flawed.
The air pockets were in the original cut, though.
And that would be, so if we're talking about, while these problems were in the original cut, then you would have to blame James Wan, who directed Aquaman, for making those changes. It's not Snyder's fault. And then you can. And that's fine. But that's not Snyder's fault. And that is not a detriment to this movie or to Snyder's vision.
Are you saying that she has a good British accent?
No, I have no comment on Amber
Good.
Heard's
That's right.
accent.
You don't, do you? Okay.
Because it's ultimately immaterial. This is basically a standalone movie. To try to shove it back into the universe, it isn't going to work. This is an Elseworld feature. It's not going to work, and that is one of the tragedies of this, but it's one of the things that makes it good and interesting and unique.
Now, Aquaman was photographed before Zack Snyder left this film. So, how did Amber Heard make a decision in this movie that was then not carried over into the movie that was being shot before Zack Snyder left?
We have to assume that James Wan shit the bed on this one, and that is not Snyder's fault, and that is not
Aquaman is a much better movie than the Snyder Cut.
Aquaman is an awesome movie, and we're not.
It is not on trial here.
And it's not on trial.
It was awesome.
It is not on trial. It has a very cool laser fight with crab monsters at the end and a giant sea monster. I think we all love that kind of shit. But James Wan dropped the ball on Amber Heard's accent, and that's going to derail the Snyder Cut? No, sir. That is dirty pool, and the court is too smart for that.
You cannot derail a train that is already off the tracks.
Does this movie do sequel baiting for movies that we're never going to get?
Yes,
and
it
in
does.
that case, trying to establish itself into the DCEU?
Well,
The
this is what I
epilogue
was saying
is a
earlier,
piece
Your
for a movie
Honor.
that does not exist.
He was pouring his heart and soul out because this was going to be like the last shot. He wanted to get it all out there. He wanted to get his ideas out there, and that explains the Lord of the Rings Return of the King-esque ending, where we got like 5 different endings.
Hate it then, hate it now.
And you are more than welcome to hate it, but again, this was a director just putting it out there, opening up, being vulnerable, and again, I applaud him for it. It was some interesting ideas that wouldn't need to be flushed out. We would want to hear more about it. But, this is what he had, and this is what he put out there, and it worked, and it was neat, and it gives us something to think about.
Now, did he finance the movie himself?
I don't think so. Did he?
Yes, I believe it was funded by AT&T, the greatest company that... oh, shit.
Mr. Rodriguez was being presented here via hologram through AT&T.
Every movie that's come out from Columbia was financed by Coke. I mean, there are huge companies
I'm recording
at play
this
and
from
making
my phone.
movies. Disney owns Marvel. I mean, what do you want here?
My mistake. I should not be recording from my phone with my AT&T wireless. Anyway, what I'm saying is, this was not self-funded. This is a movie made by corporations, and corporations have interest. And if their interest is in having a movie that is releasable in some fashion, or in making a movie that actually applies to a mainstream subset or an audience, then they have the right to do with that movie what they will. I don't like it. Sure, I want filmmakers to be able to do whatever the hell they want, but maybe they had a point this time. Maybe he should have been taken away from the film because it got ahead of him. Because he's not a very good storyteller.
No, I disagree. I think we got a very interesting story out of Justice League. We got the resurrection of Superman. We got everyone banding together. We've got Batman exploring issues of faith and reason. We got a much more fleshed out Cyborg who becomes more of the relatable everyman that we can kind of connect to. As the audience, we got the Flash setting up potential Flashpoint storylines with his time travel ability. If people had not seen the movie in the original Whedon cut, what happens is the Flash saves a family that's inexplicably living next to Chernobyl. In this movie, he gets to use the full power of the Speed Force to interact with Cyborg to give him the power he needs to interface with the mother boxes. It's ultimately a much better storytelling decision. It raises the stakes, and it's really cool.
Two things. I object to it being called the Whedon cut because it was actually the AT&T cut who hired Whedon to make the movie for them. They did not go up to Joss Whedon and say, so work your magic, Joss. Hey, have you ever done anything wrong in your life? They never did that. They probably should have. Second, are you saying that this is a great movie, or are you saying that it's better than the version that we got in 2017?
I am saying that this is a good movie, and I am saying it is better than the version we got in 2017, and that's what makes it not guilty.
Interesting. Not
absolutely
good. Interesting. Okay.
Have you presented all your exhibits, Mr. Rodriguez?
I have. I rest.
Very well. Mr. Schlender, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will not be brief. So, what is a superhero?
Oh.
Frankly, it is extraordinary that since the dawn of storytelling, humans have been fascinated by those that can do more, whether it's through blessing or sheer will. The Epic of Gilgamesh is essentially an ancient tale of the first mythic hero. The superhero through line has been so omnipresent in the human consciousness, few give it much thought beyond the superficial. In this movie, we get to see the culmination of work that Snyder had been tinkering with since 300, Watchmen, Man of Steel, and Batman versus Superman, and that is tapping into this mythic through line. And that does make some people squeamish and uncomfortable, but we learn about ourselves by watching these mythic heroes. We learn the intrinsic value of life, the cost of sacrifice, the pain of truth. It can be heavy, but it is important. We see Amazonian warriors sacrificing themselves not just for Themyscira, but for the whole world. The same with the Atlanteans. The tribal differences seem small and petty with the threat of Steppenwolf and Darkseid. And to that end, I would like to present the quote from a real-life hero, Neil Armstrong, when he was on the moon and he was looking at the Earth. He said, "It suddenly struck me that tiny pea, pretty and blue, was Earth. I put up my thumb and shut one eye, and my thumb blotted out the planet Earth. I didn't feel like a giant. I felt very, very small." In this story, that is how the heroes feel. That is how they see Earth. It made Titans like Batman and Superman feel small. And that feeling is not weakness. We have seen how those who feel like giants act in other superhero movies, and we are not richer for it.
You say that all these characters sacrifice things. What did Batman sacrifice?
No, I didn't say they all sacrifice. I said it shows us the cost of sacrifice.
It costs a sacrifice for the ones who die, I guess?
Absolutely. For you have Victor Stone giving up parts of his humanity, trying to reclaim them.
That wasn't his choice. He pretty much died.
But he had to come back from that. He had to
as a zombie.
He had to know what to leave behind and what not. Superman, who gave his life, came back ready to give it again. The Amazons, the glorious Amazons with their mighty hammers, trying to trap Steppenwolf behind that one nameless
Amazons.
The Amazons, yes. That one nameless heroic Amazon who tied the mother box to the admittedly abundance of rope that Amazons keep around and shot the arrow to send it forward before being slain by Steppenwolf. These are the sacrifices that make us uncomfortable, that we have to learn to live with and accept. She didn't know if that was going to work. She died. But they all tried their hardest. That's what makes them heroes.
May I ask you a question?
Don't.
No, you may not. Judge, may I make my next point?
Are you a Superman fan?
Yes, I am.
Do you think that
That's why the black suit was awesome, right?
Do you think that he had to die to become the Superman that he should have been since the beginning?
I think Superman was always the Superman he should have been since the beginning. And this is something that we get a lot of flack for. If you don't like the way Superman was set up in Man of Steel, you're obviously not going to like the way it concludes with Justice League. But Superman having conflict, being a human in a god's body, essentially, because he was born a god, but was raised to be a human, like a modern-day Hercules. He doesn't quite know what to do with his strength and with his power. Superman could destroy the world in the blink of an eye. And just like Victor Stone's father said to Cyborg when he was exploring his powers, he said the strength doesn't come from being able to use this power. The strength comes from not using it. And that is one thing that Superman and Cyborg in this movie teaches us.
I could have done that at home.
You should be writing greeting cards, sir. You should absolutely be doing that.
Hey, I like Superman. This is an interesting interpretation of Superman. This is a good interpretation of Batman with his conflicted. He has to be the mortal to fight the gods. He's basically
this whole murdering people thing.
Yeah. Hey, I think this is the point I was going to bring up. This is the telos of Batman. When you have a man who dresses up as a bat to beat up criminals, and then eventually he has to fight gods. I mean, he's gonna go a little nuts. We see this in every older version of Batman. We saw it in the before mentioned Frank Miller's Batman. We even saw it a bit in Batman Beyond.
Wait.
You know, he becomes older, he becomes more grizzled.
Superman brings out the murderer in him, but he murders dudes that have nothing to do with Superman in Batman v Superman all the time. He shoots guns in Justice League after Superman dies. So what has changed in him?
The movie Batmans have always been very violent. I mean, everyone talks about, Batman's not supposed to kill. Well, in Batman Begins, no one gave a fuck when he didn't save Ra's al Ghul's life. And let me tell you something, that's something that Batman, quote unquote, should have done, So this idea that Batman killing people in movies is so out there, I mean, it's simply not. I mean, he literally
did so with a great one-liner.
Thank you for responding to that question with the what were you wearing answer.
And with that, Your Honor, I rest my case.
Random.
Long-winded as always. You never disappoint, Mr. Schlender.
I know.
Right.
That was a tough one, but Ryan kept me on my toes. What could I say?
Both the prosecution and the defense have rested their case. Now, prosecution, you may begin your closing argument.
Gentlemen, I am still furious with all of you, except for Ben, for making me watch this 4-hour slog without at least the courtesy of rewarding me with sexual favors.
Well,
I am
not too
so
late.
furious. I am so furious that I have decided to channel my inner Batman and get revenge on each one of you in unique ways. One of you will be driving somewhere, only to realize that as you approach your destination, your brakes have been cut, your glove compartment filled with sour cream, and when you finally get your car to come to a stop, boom, sour cream all over your interior. One of you will be going on an eHarmony date, only to discover the woman you're having dinner with is actually me in a wig, and I'm no cheap date. I order the Clams Casino, and I forget to bring my wallet. One of you, I'll murder. I couldn't think of any creative punishments, so I'm just going to have to murder one of you. That'll have to do.
Hey.
This is all a roundabout way of saying that Zack Snyder's Justice League is guilty or whatever. Case dismissed.
Dismissed!
It is not dismissed, sir. Mr. Schlender, your closing argument.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I think there's some uncomfortable truths that we have to come to grips with here. One of them being that the Whedon or AT&T cut, it just wasn't that bad as some people claim.
Here.
I think the Snyder version goes a long way to strengthening what was good in that and adding on to it. Maybe the perfect superhero movie exists somewhere in between. But here we are discussing just the Zack Snyder version. That's what's on trial here. And what do we have here? We have a director's vision. And like I said, it may be uncomfortable, but that's not a bad thing to be challenged. It's great to see Wonder Woman kicking ass. I mean, she just gets to kick so much ass. That's why I love when Wonder Woman can do that. We get to see the heart and soul of the movie represented by Flash and Cyborg. We get to see the Batman who struggles being the mortal in this group of gods. There's a lot here. And frankly, we are better for it. When you convene in that hall of justice, take heart that we are humble mortals. Take heart that we are not burdened with that small feeling of heroes. That we are not burdened with the call to sacrifice everything. Take heart, take care, and vote not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Robb Maynard, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and special guest juror, Mr. Bouncin Bobby LePire. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. Now it is up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict. Over here. And while you're in there, please check out the free copies of my new comic book, Bailiff Man. I'm trying to get it published. Still room on the bottom floor if you want to be a backer.
We'd totally back that.
I would love it.
So that was a very interesting case, and I'm curious what everybody's thinking on what they just heard. But before we begin, I'm curious on everybody's take on the 2017 theatrically released version of Justice League. So if we go through the whole DCE, we'll be here forever. So let's just focus on that one movie and then jump into this.
I didn't think the 2017 cut was bad. It was it didn't flow well. That was my biggest concern with it. Like it was sort of rushed, it seemed like, and you could sort of see how the different visions sort of conflicted. But beyond that, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't especially good.
I remember watching the 2017 Justice League probably the weekend it was released. And I remember going, that wasn't great, but it was short. Like that was the real pro I had on it. It was under
Mercifully
2 hours.
short.
Yeah, it was like an hour 50. It was very tight. And looking at all the raw footage that he may have had to work with at the time, it's kind of like, I don't know how else I would boil this to under 2 hours. My biggest problems, so let's just touch on my big problems with 2017, is I thought Steppenwolf was incredibly bland. And I thought this one was a little better. He seemed a little more menacing, and I think he seemed better acted. He seemed less sleepy and old.
And they gave him motivation too, which you didn't really have in the Whedon cut. He's just like sort of shows up as villain man,
Yeah, and besides that, I hated Cyborg's CGI, which remains in this cut. Mr. Foreman, what did you think of the 2017 version?
It was boring. It was boring. For this quote unquote epic team up, it wasn't exciting. It looked like a bunch of CGI creations being plastered around a bunch of people in various spandex suits. And even with the worst sort of team up movies like the Avengers, like Age of Ultron's far too busy and has problems of its own, I was never bored by it. And I never just thought I was looking at just CGI fight sequences, but that's all that movie was to me. And I hated Ezra Miller a lot as the Flash. Like he's kind of funny in that movie. I don't know if he's fleshed out more here. So
you're not going to like him anymore here. It's basically he's got an extra scene or two in the beginning. He's just as obnoxious here too.
And I found that sad because I like him in other films as an actor, just not here as this version of the Flash.
He's kind of Spider-Man in this, right? Where he's there for the comic relief, and the Flash, Barry Allen isn't funny, so I don't know. Maybe if they had done Wally West, that would have worked a little bit better.
Interesting. And with that, let's move on to this case, the Zack Snyder's Justice League, and the case we heard before us. To start, I want to poke holes at two things Ryan said earlier. One, Batman used a gun in the original comics. Him using guns here, not a big deal. People forget that. Part of the evolution of the character was him having to create a code, but that code came about years after he was originally created and already a hit.
And that code is part of the comics code, right? I mean, it was censorship basically. We can't have something that's made for kids be brutally violent. That's why Batman doesn't kill. It's not a moral thing. They added that in for convenience.
Some writers throughout they just decided to weave that into his actual personality, which has made for some of the more interesting stories in that regard. But it's still not a deal breaker for me as far as that character is concerned. And then I do think this version of Superman had to die to become the Superman he quote unquote should have been from the beginning. And that's because I think Superman fares the best out of all of these. The first 40 minutes of Man of Steel is amazing. It's fantastic. And then it decides to have a plot and goes off the rails. And I think in Batman v Superman, the best moments don't involve Batman whatsoever. And I think in the theatrical version of Justice League, the best moments involve Superman.
I agree.
Zack Snyder
entirely
understands that character more than he understands the other heroes he's playing with. And
if you liked Superman in the theatrical cut, you're going to love Superman in this. But he really doesn't get any extra scenes. And I'd say that's a problem in the as much a problem in a 2-hour cut. Bigger problem in the 4-hour cut. Superman is in the background hard.
Gotcha.
He comes in barely in the last hour and is close to being a Deus Ex Machina device.
Huh. That's kind of how I felt about him in the theatrical version. So I guess
It's going to feel even harder than in the extended
that
cut.
scene where they resurrect him, though, that sticks out like a sore thumb to me in both versions. It's just like they stop the plot dead to do this weird sort of seance to bring him back.
Sure, but it's my favorite part of the theatrical. It's my favorite part when he whoops all their asses. But I never understood
I like that
why.
he gives the Flash the side eye. That was a great moment.
And you still get that. That's great. And it's funny that those funny moments were back in the
But is he a robot? Like, why is he being rebooted or something like that? I don't know that I needed that.
That's what I felt too, is that even this extended cut doesn't explain very well why Superman wants to attack them. It's like he's suspicious of them, and that triggers Cyborg's self-defense
like they
bullshit.
say, oh, he detected us as a threat, like he's a robot, you know,
Right.
like it doesn't make sense.
Like what exactly? Like if it would have made more sense if they were like somehow the mother box made him somewhat sinister. That would have made sense. And that's something in a 4-hour cut I would have liked to know more about his motivations for acting that way, and you don't get it.
Gotcha.
Or if he's just like freaking out, like he didn't have all of his memories like returned quite yet, so
Right.
he's just, you know, like running around and breaking stuff. So they're like, oh, we got to slow him down or something like that. That would make sense.
Interesting. Then I suppose we should get the elephant in the room, and that is just the style of Zack Snyder movies, the slow-mo, the speed ramping, as he calls it, and that just general visualization that's been present since essentially he started making films.
I wonder how much shorter this film would be if you sped everything up as normal. Honestly.
I can tell you, because IGN did the math, and 24 minutes and 7 seconds of this 4-hour and 2-minute movie
so much
is slow-mo. So 10.35%, according to IGN, is in slow motion. Now, the only one that bothered me is when Wonder Woman's in slow motion, seemingly moving at super speed, because super speed's not something I ever knew Wonder Woman could do. I don't think it's one of her powers.
I know it takes away the Flash's powers, doesn't it? Like
Right.
That's his special thing.
Right, exactly. At this point, it's like, well, everyone can move in super. So, like, I know we mentioned some of like 300, which I think does the slow mo well. I know Watchmen was mentioned. We overlooked Sucker Punch, which is one of the better Snyder movies.
That is my favorite movie of all time.
Of all time. Wow,
all
it's
time.
no Jaws,
Yeah.
but it's at least a best. I respect it as a favorite Snyder movie for sure.
I will explain that in a different podcast at a different time. But yes, I adore that film.
We have an opening on the 20th.
You get so much slow motion though in this thing. Like it's used for every character's introduction, and like when it takes its time like this, like every character gets maybe even 2 introductions where everything's all slow mode. And if you just took that out, this film would be so much brisker and more fun.
Obviously, the Flash has to be in slow mo, and then it's
the
like
Flash I'm okay with. Everyone else, no.
This was touched upon by the defense. Like if this was theatrical, we'd all be pulling our teeth. We'd hate it. But,
Yeah.
you know, I got to watch it in my house where after a couple chapters, I could pause, I could stretch my legs, I could take a break, I'd take a bathroom break. And I did watch this in quote unquote one sitting, right? I had a little break in the middle, but I watched it all in a morning. And the length didn't actually bother me all that much. Neither did the ending, like the epilogues didn't, because they were... The epilogues were some of the most interesting stuff because it's like, what the fuck's going on? But we wouldn't have gotten them in the theatrical cut, almost certainly.
I did like how he called it, quote unquote, 21st century movie making.
I like that too.
As it is designed to be viewed how people are watching things now. And that I agree with.
Speaking of 21st century, why is it in 4:3? Why is it in like CRT television aspect ratio?
I don't know what that means, Bobby. Explain this 4:3 thing to me.
The aspect ratio?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So for aspect ratios, it's how things are designed to be presented. It's why when you had quote unquote pan and scan for your VHS tapes, they were cropping parts of the scenes out, making them less visually interesting to zoom up closer to fill up the image on the magnetic tape on that VHS tape.
And everyone at home has widescreen television, so why are they cropping out the sides?
Yeah. And it wasn't until the advent of DVD, and Laserdisc could actually do this, but it didn't really take off properly, that you were able to properly present these 16:9 or whatever it was for X movie properly. And that's why we started getting widescreen TVs and stuff to really show off what was actually being filmed. and the aspect ratios are essentially the way the image was originally created to be seen. That's a very rudimentary, very basic, and probably very confusing explanation.
Okay, so
I learned a lot.
So
So-
4:3 is it what? It's archaic, Ben.
It cuts off the sides of the picture
No,
if you're watching it
doesn't
on a
cut off-
widescreen television.
It doesn't cut off anything. So if you watch this in widescreen, it would be cutting off the tops and the bottoms of the screen.
Okay.
Right.
So is this on HBO Max in 4?
It's in 4:3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's in
4:3.
4:3, and there's a cute
Okay.
and there's a cute little message at the beginning that due to Zack Snyder's artistic integrity, it's in 4:3, which is the real douchebag things. It's like, I don't know if you have a lot of artistic integrity, Zack.
Sometimes I was okay with it, like when you're like up close with characters, but action sequences, I want the wide.
What stories have you told that are good, Zack, that weren't written in a comic book before?
It says in order to protect the integrity of his vision, which is ironic because the movie exists because they meddled with his vision in the first place.
True.
I have a question.
I
Why is this
can't-
lawyer in the room?
True, because
Happens on the other side. They have to pass through every
So
so
I
often.
mean, I can't really fault Snyder for leaving the project, and I mean it was his baby, and I don't mind him doing a director's cut at all. I certainly don't mind director's cuts. I mean, it made Blade Runner better, and I'd be very interested in seeing a 2.5 hour version of this. At the length practically of what Whedon did, but with the ending Snyder gave us, like that climactic battle that Snyder gave us in this, is undeniably better. It's a better final fight. It's probably the best final fight of any comic book movie that I've seen yet. It is better than what the Avengers do. The Avengers go 40, 50 minutes in a final fight. There's tons of conversations in it. It's dull. They had a concrete plan. It's tight. In a movie that's not tight at all, they had a tight final fight sequence.
Nice.
That's a vast improvement to the film. So I'm just going to go on record as far as, so I can put in my verdict so you guys can decide. This was an interesting case. I know Ryan and Dylan have always had this will they, won't they thing. And I hate to come down as a Schlender bro, but I'm going to have to come down with the not guilty. Because I don't think this is a great movie. I don't think it deserves some fucking 97% on Rotten Tomatoes audience score. It's not a great movie.
Does it have that? Oh my
It
gosh.
did, yeah, exactly. But it doesn't go all the way to bad to me, because as a comic book movie, it hits all the right notes for me. So I'm going not guilty.
All right. Nice. And your vote, my friend?
I'm essentially with Rob. I do think that this is not a great film. It is not a perfect film. There is a lot that could be done better. This does improve on the theatrical cut by, sort of giving some of these characters more motivation and more intro. But it also creates new problems while it solves those other ones by just going overly into it. By like, I didn't care about that dream sequence. I didn't care about like Aquaman having 2 intros or these ladies singing as he walks into the sea, like what was that? I don't like Cyborg like being able to destroy the world. Like, why would your dad give you that? I wouldn't trust myself with his powers. I wouldn't give it to my kid. So it creates new problems. So I think they're both sort of on the same level. They're bad for different reasons, but they're both good enough that they're enjoyable. So I am also not guilty.
All right. For me, because I haven't seen the Snyder cut, I think
By choice.
by choice, because yes, I wanted to wait till after this trial to see which argument could sway me the most, and I think it comes down to whether we vote if this is a good movie on its own terms, or if we're simply voting that it's better than the theatrical version. And the theatrical version simply, it's too boring for me to hate, and therefore it's too dull for me to, if that were the version on trial, I wouldn't care enough to vote it guilty. And if this is better, by all accounts, then I must go with not guilty.
I like that. I would say, though, if we put 2017 Whedon cut on trial, I probably also would go not guilty.
Oh, interesting.
Because
So would I.
Because if I was handed this 4-hour Snyder cut and then some executive said, make this under 2 hours, I have no idea how you'd come up with anything besides what Whedon did. The only thing I do different from what Whedon did is to put the Snyder ending, the climactic fight. But besides that, you get mostly the same story. I mean, so even saying with that, I'd put them both as not guilty in my book. Not great, but not guilty.
That makes sense. For me, Justice League is just, I've forgotten more about it than I could possibly care to remember, and I have no desire to rewatch it. This, at least, as artistic merit in terms of just being able to allow him to finish, Zack Snyder to finish off this idea that he had that got taken away from him, partially due to tragedy beyond anybody else's control. I think just for that, like, engaging existence of its own, I would probably rewatch this more often, presuming it's at least slightly better than the theatrical version.
Slightly better. Yep.
So I think we're about ready to go out there and give our verdict to that very handsome judge.
Oh, very good. But we have to decide who's going to give sexual favors to Ryan now.
I thought that was going to be all of us because, well,
volunteer distribute.
I'm married and I don't have a car. I can't get the other two. So I'm the one who's going to murder.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Zack Snyder's Justice League, we find the defendant not guilty of being a bad movie.
Wow.
The verdict is so rendered. As such, I hereby open the floodgates for more 4-hour-long director's cut comic book movies to be produced. Man of Steel director's cut, Batman v Superman director's cut, and even a 4-hour cut of The Phantom may be produced. There was more evil that need to be slammed in that film. Court is adjourned.
What have I done? No!
You fucked us all, Dylan. Good job.
This is Skip Leg Day, outside the Reels of Justice for the Gabagoo Gazette. Mr. Rodriguez, would you care to share your thoughts on today's verdict?
Zip. That's me pissing on the ashes of this podcast. Peace out, fuckers.
I thought you had popped your blow-up love doll. And Mr. Schlender, would you care to share your thoughts on today's verdict?
Thank you, Skip. You know, ever since we started this show, I mean, we don't usually get to go up against each other, and I've always had the most just tremendous amount of respect for Ryan as a lawyer, and I really was looking forward to going up against him because I do think he's the best, and it was an honor. It was a great case. I was thrilled that I could go into court with my friend like this, and it was great. It really was, and you know, I don't take this victory lightly. You know, I appreciate the jury coming around. So thank you, Skip.
You got it by heartstrings. You got it by heartstrings.
I love you too, Dylan.
So
I do
beautiful.
love you, Ryan. I meant every word.
Thank you very much. That's all we have from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis. I love you guys.
Oh, we love you too, Skip.
Let me have a piece of this. Come on.
I'll get in here, Judge. You too, Foreman.
All right, no hugging crap on this show. All right.
Yeah.
Can I say, now that we're out of our characters that we're playing, that I didn't hate this movie?
I knew it.
What?
It wasn't hot garbage.
How long have you hated the idea of this movie, though?
Since I knew it was going to be a reality.
And what changed?
It's not the same movie that Batman v Superman is, like, in any way. And I think that
That's a low bar.
in terms of that third act fight, I was genuinely invested in enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that this is a great movie. I think it is a vast improvement. Not enough that I would call it a complete vindication of that vision, but I do appreciate that it exists.
And I want to just touch on this briefly. Is one of the things I kind of resented about the DCEU is it felt like they were trying to catch up to the MCU. And I thought, well, that's so foolish when you're so many movies back. You can't do that. But why not do what you're good at? You had a good trilogy from Nolan's trilogy. And now stepping back from this,
they had
the last movie sucks. The last movie, yes, I hate Dark Knight Rises. Don't break my point here, Bobby. I hate Dark Knight Rises more than anyone. But the point
we've
is,
already established in this courtroom that we all hate the Dark Knight Rises.
I think we have. Yeah,
you have a trilogy.
Word, but it's not good.
You have a trilogy, though, and my point is, stepping back from this, Zack Snyder now has his trilogy, right? You got Man of Steel, BVS, Justice League. Don't come back to DCEU, Zack Snyder, leave it. Go do other things now. Go do Sucker Punch 3 or 4 or 6 or whatever. Don't come back to DCEU.
And I say the same thing to DC. Don't do what Marvel's doing. Do your own thing. Keep doing that.
Don't do what Donnie Don't does.
Do not
Bobby?
chase success.
And Rob, I gotta say, I was really surprised when you said this was the best final fight in any comics movie. I was like, wow. But then I was thinking about it, I'm like, I might agree with that.
At least of the ensemble ones. To me, like, the best fight is either like Winter Soldier, where they're fist fighting, or Ant-Man. I love where they're shrinking and growing in Ant-Man.
I do like Winter Soldier quite a bit.
But of an ensemble, like if I'm comparing this Zack Snyder's Justice League to the Avengers and the Avengers Age of Ultron, this was better.
Yeah.
Wow.
Better than Endgame, too.
Better than Endgame, too.
Well, I mean, Endgame I have a visceral emotional reaction to.
Because of Howard the Duck.
Yes, because of Howard the Duck. But this, in terms of visually, the Russo brothers are not Zack Snyder visually. I think that it is kind of like a masterwork of kind of pacing and staging. And it almost makes me grateful that I sat through the entire thing to get to that point. The problem is I sat through everything to get to that point.
I know.
Bobby, what has been keeping you busy lately besides not watching the Snyder Cut?
You lucky dog.
Well, South by Southwest Film Festival just ended Saturday night. I reviewed 20 movies for it. I wound up watching 21. I did not review one of them. It was there was nothing to say about it, good or bad. It had nothing to latch on to talk about. So I opted not to review that one. But I was very...
Wow, your non-review is the review. This is 21st century movie reviews.
Beyond that, it's just the usual. It's a lot of writing the normal non-festival reviews, film threat, editing, social media, all that jazz.
Can we catch those 20 of 21 reviews on Film Threat, or do we need to go to South
Film
by
Threat, yes. They're all on Film Threat. It's the only place I write for. Specifically, I would look up my review of The Spine of Night, which is a rotoscope fantasy animated film in the vein of like Ralph Bakshi and Frank Frazetta's Fire and Ice and movies like that.
You know just what gets my stones hard.
No kidding. Yeah, send me a link, Bobby.
I love it. And Bobby, speaking of, we'll just jump to your recommendation. What are you recommending? What is a film people should check out?
Well, obviously, Return of Daimogen.
Yes.
Always be. Seriously, I had a different movie in mind, and then yesterday I watched this movie I'm about to recommend, and it's so gonzo insane weird. I was like, this is what I have to talk about. It's called The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb.
Okay.
Do not know what year it came out. I wound up finding the DVD for like $7 and thought it sounded cool. It's a Bullock Brothers movie. It's stop motion animated / live action. And it's about a science experiment gone wrong in which Tom Thumb is born extremely tiny. He then gets stolen, enters a science lab, meets this insane dragon thing that doesn't have any flesh on its body, then meets Jack, as in Jack and
Beanstalk?
the giant
killer.
folktale. Yeah. Folktale. And it turns out the giants are like the normal humans. And it's insane. It's really difficult to totally describe. It's only has a handful of dialogue, and most of it is just people's names. It is very.
So you're sending me the link,
visual.
right?
It's 1993.
Thank you.
This sounds excellent.
Bobby
always has the best recommendations.
I bought it on DVD. I don't even know if it's streaming anywhere. I should have looked that up before recommending it.
Oh, I'll buy it. I'll buy it if I have to.
It's so cool. So that is The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb.
Let's hop over. Mr. Schlender, you were the victor, so what's your recommendation?
Thank you. I think it is important to remember that not all heroes are super. And in that vein, I am recommending 1995's The Cure. This heartfelt story tells the saga of two young friends on a quest to find a cure for AIDS. Sometimes there is nothing more heroic to someone than being their friend. Ryan.
A beautiful.
Wait, do you know something about my medical history that you're not telling me?
Jesus.
All I'm saying
in
is
private, sir.
we got to take an adventure down the bayou.
Wow. I think
also has a Mark Cohen song that was never released except in the movie, not even in the official soundtrack. It's called My Great Escape. You can find that song on YouTube. It's a beautiful song, and it really should get released, but you can't find it on YouTube.
Ryan, what's your recommendation?
Since we're talking DC superheroes today, my recommendation is a superior version of the leader of the Justice League, Martian Manhunter, 1995's Batman Forever. This film, while no masterpiece, is far better than it gets credit for, understanding that these are all goofy characters and leaning into it. It is essential to my identity. It is a formative experience for 9-year-old Ryan, and I would defend it with gusto. I like the way it looks. I like the way it feels.
That's a 3-hour cut I want to see.
We have an opening on the 20th.
I'm not joking. The original Joel Schumacher cut of that movie, 3 hours long.
Okay.
Oh, wait, you're serious?
Yes.
Can I finish my goddamn recommendation, please? I like the way it looks. I like the way it feels. It has my single favorite cinematic Batman moment, and it has Chase Meridian, a hopeless crush I have never gotten over and never will. Batman Forever is currently streaming on Disney Plus, I think.
I believe it's
Probably.
it's certainly not. But it's got Drew Barrymore too, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Oh,
It does.
Drew Barrymore made me want to be the Riddler. Big Ben, Your Honor, what's your recommendation?
If you want to see a better belabored Zack Snyder comic book movie, I personally enjoyed Watchmen much more than this DC iteration. He definitely owes a lot to the source material, but he leans into the themes of deconstructing the concept of a hero in the Nixon era. Read the comic book as well. I think both are well worth your time.
What do you think of the ending from the comic books to the movie?
I'm okay with the ending, honestly.
Thank you, Ryan. It's stupid in the movie. But
Give me that squid! Give me that squid!
Yes! The squid is set up. It's what drives the guy crazy. Oh, we don't have time for this.
We don't have time
Rob,
for this.
what's your
Hashtag
recommendation?
give me that
I
squid!
think it works too. Sorry.
Release the squid cut.
I'm
Rob, what's your recommendation?
I'm just skeptical that there was a squid that Ben didn't like.
Rob, what is your recommendation?
Do you bleed, Rob?
In honor of Zack Snyder, I'm going to recommend a documentary I just recently watched about another publicly maligned auteur, Happy Happy Joy Joy, the Ren and Stimpy story.
Oh, God, Rob.
Despite the title, this documentary doesn't quite tell the happy and joyful story of Ren and Stimpy as much as it tells the unhappy and joyless story of its creator, John K. I like to say John K. because Chris Falusi is fucking impossible to say. However, if you grew up a fan of the show like me, it offers an inside look at the show's staggering rise to prominence, the veritable rock star team of talented artists that put it together, and how an undeniably genius creative mind can destroy their own career with ego and toxicity. It serves as a reminder that a dark heart can lurk just beneath the surface of an individual who otherwise seems so full of light. Isn't that right, Ryan?
It's good. Good movie.
Yeah, I wish they had included more about like when Bob Camp took over the show. They're just like, that's not interesting anymore. And it's
That
like,
was disappointing. Yeah.
There's 3 more seasons, guys, but they should have just
2
called
more.
the John K story. But
And I wanted to hear
I
about
would
adult
like to
cartoon
thank
parties.
Bouncin Bobby LePire for joining us tonight.
thank you, Bob.
Yeah!
Thank you for having me back. I love this show.
Yes,
Well,
And this show loves you.
we love having you.
Absolutely.
How many times is this for you now? Number 5?
I think it's 4.
Should we schedule your favors now? Or do you wanna wait till
Yeah,
after the
okay.
recording?
Just
No,
Let's
that's-
take this offline.
we're friends.
It's a punch card. He needs 10.
Yeah, exactly. Your 10th visit, and you'll get a T-shirt.
Yes.
But we love having you, and everyone should check out Bobby's stuff on Film Threat, and check out, of course, Return of Dimogen. Bobby would really appreciate the hell out of that. And we hope that you'll join us again next time as the reels of justice keep turning.
All right, everyone, all in one voice, like I said at the beginning. 1, 2, 3. Count it!
Bye.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.